Sandra and Sally all decide to go on a diet. They want to look good in a bikini for the summer, so they stop eating so they can lose weight. Well, after a couple days, Susie and Sandra realize that this is stupid and I kind of want a hamburger right now. So they stop and they go back to their regular eating habits like nothing happened. What about Sally? Well, something happened to Sally. Sally's different. And something in her brain tells her that this is not that stupid and I should keep going. What's wrong with Sally? What's up, recovery community? I'm Maya, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the genetics of eating disorders and why Sally is different than the others. Did you know that mental disorders are biological? What? No, this is completely untrue. Eating disorders are caused by society and the media, and anorexia is strictly because of Photoshop and magazines and bad parenting. Trust me, I'm a therapist. Completely not true, average therapist of eating disorders. Mental illness is far more complicated than that. While there is no gene for anorexia, eating disorders and any mental illness is linked very closely to biology and genetics. So depending on what crap your parents went through determines how likely you are to go through crap and why you go through crap. Not just anybody can get an eating disorder. You have to have a brain that is vulnerable to mental illness. And that means that your brain is wired differently. That means that it is structured differently, not too differently. Your brain doesn't look like a kidney. It's still a brain. But it's different. And that is the main thing. Somebody who diets and tries to be anorexic will realize kind of quickly that it's not going to work for them, and they'll go right back. Nothing will happen. But somebody with this vulnerability will continue to restrict their food, and then they'll become afraid of it, and then they will have a full-on eating disorder because their brain was vulnerable to it. While their friend over there, who did the exact same thing and got tired of it, won't get an eating disorder because their brain is not vulnerable to it. Does that make sense, terrible therapist lady? You don't know what you're talking about. Every single one of my patients tells me that they want to be skinny, so obviously, the reason that we have eating disorders is strictly because we keep on photoshopping Jennifer Lawrence. Trust me, I'm a professional. That's kind of true. Terrible, terrible therapist lady. But the only way for these cultural factors to make somebody have an eating disorder, and I say that loosely because these things do not make somebody have an eating disorder. Nothing makes somebody have an eating disorder. The only way for these things to really contribute to somebody having an eating disorder is if that individual has the vulnerability in their brain. Somebody who's normal will look at that photoshopped model, feel bad about themselves for about 2 hours, and then just go on with their lives. If they skip a meal, they're not gonna have an eating disorder because they can't. If you go into treatment for an eating disorder at a very typical treatment facility, you're gonna hear this a lot. This is all your fault. Look at what you're doing to your parents. Wow, therapist lady. Blaming it on me really, really, really motivates me to recover. Thanks. Thanks a lot. Eating disorders are not your fault. It's just the way that you're made up. And unfortunately, something in your life triggered that. It's not because you want control. It's not because you had bad parents. It's not because they didn't pay attention to you enough. It's because of your brain. And there's research to show that. But a lot of therapists these days choose to not look at that research and try to target the individual. They tell them, this is all your fault. Why can't you just stop? Just eat. And I will get into treatment methods in a different video. But right now, I want you guys to know that eating disorders are genetic. Yeah. Tell that to your therapist who keeps on blaming it on you. And I know this from personal experience. Eating disorders are an illness, not a choice. Because really, who would choose to have something as disgusting and terrifying as anorexia? You might think you want anorexia, and if you're unlucky enough like me to have this terrible brain, you might want to start having anorexia, and then once you get it, you're like, shit, why? Once patients are given a reason that is based in science for having this problem, it puts everything into a different perspective. No more are they wrapping their brains around why they got it and trying to think about all of the magazines they looked at and all of the bad boyfriends they had. We now have a reason why we have these eating disorders and this depression and this anxiety, and it's all based in science, and science can explain everything. So thank you, science, for telling me why I have anorexia. And screw you, therapists, who are not looking at the research that's right in front of their eyes, at the brain images, at all the MRIs, and all of the studies that show that mental illness is based in science. It's really not that hard. Somebody with anorexia, when they restrict their food, we get endorphins in our brain that tell us it's good. There are parts of our brain that interpret hunger differently than other people. We end up seeing food as anxiety-provoking and fear-inducing. It's what our brain tells us to do. We can work toward getting over that in recovery and not letting our brain take over and make food the enemy, but it takes time. Stay tuned for a whole video about how anorexia affects your brain and what the anorexic brain looks like. There is so much more that can be said about this topic, but I'm almost at 7 minutes, so I'm going to leave it to our terrible therapist lady. Any last words, terrible, terrible therapist lady?
Just go eat a milkshake, you ungrateful little child.
Thank you so much for watching this video. Remember, recovery is worth it, recovery is possible, and recovery is key. Stay recovery-minded.